My mom yelled, "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. That house is your sister's now." I didn't argue. I just stayed silent and prepared. 2 days later, when my sister walked in, she wished she had never stepped inside. Before we see what I did next, I have to ask, have you ever been the one doing all the work while someone else got all the credit? Drop a yes in the comments and let me know where you're watching from right now. I want to see who is with me. After my mother Erin screamed those words at me, the sound didn't echo. It just hung there heavy and wet like the humid savanna air outside. 48 hours. That was the timeline she gave me to vacate the life I had spent 5 years rebuilding. My sister Kelsey needed the house. She needed it for her wedding, for her aesthetic, for her followers. I looked around the foyer. The hand-restored wainscoting I had sanded down until my fingerprints were gone. The custom crown molding I had sourced from a salvage yard in Atlanta and installed myself. My father Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the floorboards I had paid to have refinished last year. This wasn't just a house. It was a rotting Victorian money pit that my late grandmother Eleanor had left behind. 5 years ago, it was slated for condemnation. The roof was caving in, the foundation was cracking, and the city was threatening to level it. My parents were broke. They couldn't afford the $165,000 needed to save it. So I paid it. I paid every dime. I was 24, just starting my interior architecture firm, and I poured my entire life savings into this place. I spent my weekends scraping lead paint and rewiring electrical sockets instead of dating. I skipped vacations to pay for a new slate roof. I did it because my father had looked me in the eye with tears in his and said, "Haley, this will always be your home. You are saving our family's legacy." I believed him. That was my mistake. I thought I was investing in a future. But now, standing there while my mother checked her watch waiting for me to leave so she could start staging the rooms for Kelsey's bridal suite, I realized the truth. I hadn't been investing. I had been paying rent. Expensive, emotional rent. You see, in my family, love was never free. It was a transaction. And I was the one who always paid the bill. My therapist calls it the invisible chain of the survivor. When you grow up feeling like an option, not a priority, you learn to make yourself useful. You become the fixer, the provider, the one who solves problems before they even happen. You do this because you are terrified that if you stop being useful, they will stop loving you. I paid that $165,000 not just to save a house, but to buy my place in this family. I thought if I made the house perfect, maybe I would be perfect enough for them. But Kelsey never had to pay. She just had to exist. She was the golden child, the influencer with the perfect smile and the carefully curated life. She didn't need to fix anything because she was the prize. I was just the maintenance crew. And now the maintenance was done. The house was beautiful. It was magazine ready, which meant my utility had expired. I was being discarded like a contractor whose job was finished. "Fine," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by how calm it sounded. 48 hours. My mother let out a sigh of relief as if she had been expecting a fight and was annoyed she didn't get one. "Good," she said. "Make sure the guest room is clear. Kelsey wants to set up her makeup station there." I walked past them up the stairs I had reinforced with my own hands. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the vintage brass doorknob I had spent 3 weeks hunting down on eBay. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And it was mine. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. I didn't call a moving truck. I called a specialized architectural salvage crew I worked with on high-end renovations. "Hey, Mike," I said when he answered. "I have a rush job. A full strip-out. Everything goes." Everything he asked. Even the fixtures. "Especially the fixtures," I said. "If I bought it, it goes." The deadline ticked down. I became a ghost in my own home. I packed my clothes in silence, ignoring my mother's bustling excitement as she measured windows for new drapes she wouldn't be paying for. She didn't notice me tagging items with blue painter's tape. She didn't notice the salvage crew parking around the back alley. When they started, it was surgical. We didn't break anything. We simply uninstalled. The vintage crystal chandelier in the dining room gone. The custom marble island top in the kitchen lifted and crated. The smart appliances disconnected and removed. The imported Italian faucets unscrewed. We took the drapes. We took the blinds. We took the cabinet hardware. We took the light switch covers. We even took the antique doorknobs, replacing them with the cheapest hollow contractor-grade knobs I could find at the hardware store. By the time 48 hours were up, the house wasn't a home anymore. It was a shell. It was an echo chamber of bare studs and subflooring. It looked exactly like what it was. A house that had been stripped of its soul. I stood in the foyer one last time. The walls were scarred where the sconces used to be. The floor was dull without the rugs. It was ugly. It was dark. It was barren. It was the physical manifestation of my absence. I dropped the key on the floor of the hollow room. It made a lonely metal sound against the wood. I walked out, got into my car, and drove away. I didn't look back. I turned off my phone, but I could imagine the scene. Kelsey arriving with her bridal party phones out, ready to film a home tour for her followers. Expecting a magazine spread. Walking into a construction site. I drove to a hotel on the other side of Savannah. I ordered room service. I took a long, hot shower. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't worry about a leaking pipe or a drafty window. When I finally turned my phone back on, it almost melted from the notifications. 17 missed calls from my mother. 12 from my father. 30 texts from Kelsey. I opened one from Kelsey. It was all caps. You ruined my aesthetic. This is sick. Put it back. Then a voicemail from my father. His voice was shaking with rage. Haley, this is theft. You stole the fixtures. You stole the value of this house. You are going to prison. Put it back or I am calling the police. I listened to it twice. They weren't sad I was gone. They weren't worried about where I was sleeping. They were furious that the amenities were gone. They were shocked. Not because I was cruel, but because the appliance had stopped working. This is the trap of normalizing cruelty. They had normalized my exploitation so much that my leaving felt like theft to them. They genuinely believed they were entitled to my labor, my money, my taste. They thought the house came with a Haley warranty. Well, the warranty had just expired. The next morning, a process server handed me a large envelope in the hotel lobby. My father wasn't bluffing. He was suing me. The document was thick, heavy with legal jargon. Destruction of property. Theft of fixtures. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. He was claiming damages in excess of $200,000. I felt a moment of panic. A cold spike of fear in my chest. Did I go too far? I knew fixtures were legally considered part of the real estate once attached. Maybe I had crossed a line. Maybe my anger had just cost me my freedom. I called Grace. Grace wasn't just my best friend. She was a shark of a family law attorney who specialized in estate disputes. She had been my grandmother Eleanor's executrix. She knew where all the bodies were buried. Meet me at the office, she said, her voice clipped. Bring everything. I sat in her glass-walled conference room, the lawsuit sitting between us like a grenade. Grace flipped through it, her face unreadable. This is a temper tantrum, Haley, she said finally. He's throwing legal spaghetti at the wall. But we need to respond. Let's dig. We spent hours going through the old renovation paperwork. Every receipt, every invoice, every permit. I had documentation for everything, the chandelier, the marble, the faucets. I had proof I paid for them. But Grace wasn't looking at the receipts. She was digging through the original transfer files from 5 years ago when my grandmother died and my parents took over the property. She frowned, pulling out a dusty manila folder labeled simply 2019. Ryan, Legal. Haley, she said slowly, tapping the file. Do you remember the lawsuit your dad had back then? The supplier dispute. I nodded. I remembered the tension in the house. He had been sued by a major materials supplier for non-payment. He was terrified of losing everything, his business, his savings, the house. That was the excuse they used for why they couldn't pay for the renovations. They claimed their assets were frozen. Grace pulled out a document. It wasn't a receipt. It was a deed. A quitclaim deed. To hide the house from creditors, she said, looking at me over her glasses, your parents signed this. They transferred the property fully to you. I stared at the paper. The memory came back in a rush. They had sat me down at the kitchen table speaking in hushed tones. They told me it was just a formality, a temporary shield. They called it a tax shelter strategy. They said they were putting the house in my name to protect the family legacy, and that they would file the reversal paperwork as soon as the lawsuit was settled. Grace tapped the paper again. They never filed the reversal, Haley. What? They were too cheap, she said, a dry, humorless laugh escaping her lips. To transfer it back to themselves, they would have had to pay the transfer taxes and recording fees. They just didn't. They assumed you would never check. They assumed you would always be the good little daughter who did what she was told. She smiled a sharp, dangerous smile that made me realize exactly why she was the best lawyer in Savannah. Legally, she said, you are not the tenant. You are not the contractor. You are the sole owner of that house. Your parents aren't landlords. They are squatters. I felt the room spin. The reality of it crashed into me. For 5 years, I hadn't been renovating their house. I had been renovating my house. They had been living in my house rent-free, acting like kings in a castle they didn't own. They had evicted me from my own property. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Grace picked up her phone. Do you want to send a letter? Or do you want to do this in person? I thought about Kelsey's wedding rehearsal. It was happening tomorrow morning. My mother had posted on Facebook that they were saving the day hiring emergency stagers to make the empty house look presentable. They were determined to have their show. They were determined to win. In person, I said. The next morning, the Savannah sun was blazing. I pulled up to the house, my house. The driveway was full of cars. Caterers were unloading trays. A florist van was blocking the garage. A rental company was setting up white folding chairs on the lawn. My parents were on the porch directing traffic, looking stressed but triumphant. They thought they had fixed the problem. They thought they had erased me. I didn't come alone. I parked my car and stepped out. Behind me, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up, lights flashing silently. 2 deputies got out, adjusting their belts. My father saw me first. He marched down the steps, his face turning a violent shade of purple. You have some nerve showing up here, he shouted, his voice booming over the sound of the wind. After what you did, get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing. I kept walking. My heels clicked rhythmically on the pavement. I didn't stop until I was face to face with him. Kelsey ran out onto the porch, still in her silk bride robe, a glass of champagne in her hand. Get her out of here, Dad, she screamed. She's trying to ruin my day again. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother, who was standing behind him, arms crossed, looking at me with pure disgust. You can't kick us out, Haley, my father spat, pointing a finger in my face. I bought this place. I own it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the certified copy of the quitclaim deed. I held it up, the paper crisp in the humid air. No, Dad, I said. My voice was low, steady. You didn't. You hid this place. You hid it to save your own skin because you didn't want to pay your debts, and you were too cheap to take it back. I handed him the document. He looked at it. I saw his eyes scan the page. I saw the moment the air left his lungs. He saw his own signature, the date, the notary stamp, the undeniable truth of his own greed. This house is mine, I said. It has been mine for 5 years. You are trespassing, and I want you out. Now. The deputies stepped forward. Sir, is this your signature? One of them asked, gesturing to the paper. My father sputtered. We had an agreement. It was a tax thing. Is this your signature? The deputy repeated, his hand resting on his belt. Yes, my father whispered. Then you need to vacate the premises, the deputy said. The owner has requested your removal. My mother started screaming. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was the shriek of someone losing control. This is a misunderstanding. We are her parents. You can't do this. I looked at her. The woman who gave me 48 hours to leave. The woman who replaced me without a second thought. You have 48 minutes, I said. Get your things. Get your guests. And get out. The wedding was canceled. Well, not canceled. It was moved to a motel banquet hall out by the highway. I heard the lighting was terrible. I didn't keep the house. I couldn't. The memories were too tainted. The walls held too many echoes of my own desperation. I sold it as is. Even stripped, the market was hot and the structural work I had done added massive value. I made a significant profit. I used that capital to launch my own boutique architecture firm. I named it Eleanor Design, after the only person in that family who had ever loved me without conditions. My parents tried to sue me again, claiming fraud. It didn't go anywhere. The paper trail was too clean. They ended up in a small apartment, their reputation in ruins, their finances exposed. Kelsey stopped speaking to me, which was honestly the best wedding gift she could have given me. I sat in my new office looking out at the Savannah skyline. I was no longer the fixer. I was the builder. I had cut the cord, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of falling. I had built a new foundation, one they could never touch. This is the justice of the sower. The best revenge wasn't the eviction. It wasn't the humiliation. It was taking the resources they tried to steal and using them to plant a garden they could never burn down. If you have ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself, share this story and tell me in the comments what was the moment you finally said enough. Don't forget to follow for more stories of justice served.